Chilla, a cartoon by Daily Wire, proudly markets itself as non-political, anti-woke, but this is a cartoon that advocates for homeschooling in a potentially dangerous manner. In today's video essay, we'll dissect the depths of this propaganda. Every night when I come home from my shift at the ass factory, I see my roommate sniveling over this cartoon dog, Bluey, and I ask him, "Hey buddy, you okay?" But in a way that's cool and detached and affirms how straight I am. And through tears he'll tell me, This is the most beautiful cartoon I've ever seen. It's so good. You have no idea." And he says it's cool because the dad in Bluey is like super dad. And I'm all for pro-male stories, especially ones that are super trad and telling the masses that reproducing and raising kids is fun. Can't get any more trad than that. So I'd watch Bluey myself, but if I did, then I'd be at risk of having a conversation with my roommate about something other than all the we're smashing. And that's pretty gay. Which is too bad, because with the way everyone's hyping up this male role model, Bluey seems like a good time. Luckily, Daily Wire has swooped in with an anti-woke alternative. So if you're triggered by the fact that Bluey, the girl dog, is blue, Chilla is here to right that wrong. All of the boys are blue and the girls are pink. Take that, liberals. I watched the first 2 seasons of Chilla for this review, and while the oven preheats for this roast, I'd like to say the few good things I found with Chilla. I'm not opposed to the premise of this show, which aims to be an anti-woke kids program. I agree, mainstream media is garbage, so good on you, Chilla crew, for taking matters into your own hands, instead of taking the coward's way out and crying about the problem to YouTube. And on that note, you'll always hate the shit your parents are into, so if mom and dad are raging about the woke, that means the easiest way to rebel is by wearing a pronoun pin. I know this cartoon's gonna indoctrinate the youth more than Drag Queen Story Hour, so kudos where it's due. As for the actual plot, I think it's cool the story depicts a homeschooled family. Usually homeschool characters are dismissed as a one-off joke, and the stereotypical image of a homeschooler is either an under-socialized high IQ autist, or someone who's replaced book learning with life on a commune. Everyone here seems pretty normal, and props to the show for showing a healthy family dynamic. I hate hearing parents argue about their kids, and mercifully, you will not find any of that here. Took me a few episodes to settle into this family dynamic since I'm an emotionally damaged man-child who can't understand social dynamics, but once I did, I could really appreciate what they're going for. There's lots of little light-natured jabs that the family takes at one another. It feels very playful, but grounded. At its best, this show reminded me of a kid-friendly Bob's Burgers. The best joke in the series was from the episode Chilla Swap, where the kids get to be the parents and the parents get to be the kids. Chip, eager that he's dad for a day, is going to do what he's always wanted. Blast the AC. Papa Chilla, voiced by Rob Schneider, responds by suppressing his anger and gritting his teeth, yes-anding his son's antics. He doesn't want to ruin the fun, but he's doing everything he can to keep playtime going. Definitely ranks among my top 5 jokes about dad being overly cautious about the thermostat. But the character interactions aren't always fun. When the show's at its worst, it's a whole lot of scrunched up faces snapping back at smarm brows. So if seeing this single screen cap sends you into a murderous rage, you're better off skipping this show for toddlers. There is also a strange insistence on cutting back to the parents looking adoringly at their kiddos, and it felt like it was signaling to the parents that now is your time to go "aww" at this adorable moment. And I'll get more into how this show caters to parents in a little bit. Anyway, this isn't going to be a big deal for most watchers, but they did it enough times that I began to process it as their version of the Johnny Test whip crack sound effect. But look, right now I'm trying to compliment the show so I won't spiral too hard on the nitpicks just yet. So back to compliments. I really dug this show's visual design. Everything just looked pleasant. It was nice. I'd like to especially compliment the pet designs in this show. Instead of dogs and cats, Chilla's world has everyone keeping oversized bugs for pets. Such a neat little detail, and they all look adorable. It's a creative way to circumvent the goofy Pluto problem. The parents in Chilla take advantage of homeschooling by offering a lot of big creative ways to teach their lessons. Shows the advantage of homeschooling. You can teach with ways other than books, and a lot of everyday things can be springboards for teachable moments. But this is where the show starts to fall apart for me. Alright, I'm going to try to keep the autism at bay here. I can accept that in this world, animals can talk and pay taxes and chinchillas are real. This is all fine. And most media depicting a student life isn't going to show the drudgery of studying. But I found myself wondering, when do the kiddos here actually start learning? Seems like a whole lot of horseplay. And maybe as soon as the cameras stop rolling, they're buckling down and studying for the SAT. But why is this show forcing me to dream up these bizarro headcanons for their education when the focus is on the homeschool experience? Most of the lessons in Chilla are lessons in morality, rather than outright book learning. Even when the show discusses literature or history, they're usually to make a point about a pro-social or emotional message, which sure is just as important as learning the facts. But there's a lot of times in this show where they could have taken an educational turn, but instead they opted to show the parents' latest cardboard creation. So all of children's media has to sell itself to the parents first, because if mom doesn't approve, she'll shut that shit off. And some of the funniest stink pieces on the internet are parents whining about how Bluey made them feel bad. That is, the parents in Bluey are just a little too good. So I think Chilla is circumventing this problem, but not in regards to emotional learning, even though that is its focus. I have kind of a wild theory, but hear me out. I think Chilla exists to reassure parents that homeschooling is cool. It's fun, it's easy, and you can do it too. Because when I watch Chilla, it doesn't feel like right-wing propaganda. It feels like any other mainstream kids show. The character designs and gender roles don't feel significantly more trad than any other mainstream kids media. It's the wrong show to indoctrinate the youth. But I could see this planting the seed of homeschooling for both parent and child. If Junior watches this, his takeaway might be that homeschooling is sick, because it unlocks fun adventures and silly costumes with mom and dad. From the parent's perspective, it's reassuring you that homeschooling is more like a chillaxed improv night than it is knuckling down and drilling flashcards. The protagonist Chip has a pretty open disdain for reading. Both his parents and the narrative is just fine with that. And since I'm a low IQ dweeb with a Goodreads account, oh boy did that trigger me big time. But I know that books aren't the only way to get good at learning, and you do learn a lot more when you act things out and get more engaged with the material. This is why I'm such a fucking moron, because I'd rather keep my snoot in a book rather than actually apply myself. It was just pretty unusual seeing a kid's show voice such active disdain for reading, unless you view it through the lens of being homeschool propaganda. From the kid's perspective, it's reassuring you, the child watching this program, that reading is cringe. If only your parents would cave and start homeschooling you, then you'd never have to deal with it again. And from the parent's perspective, it's showing you that you no longer need to argue with Junior to sit down and read. There's ways to nurture his education that's unique to him that go outside of the typical educational hegemony. And the thing is, I'm not conceptually opposed to an educational cartoon that stars a character who hates reading. Everyone learns in different ways, so if your protagonist is a high-energy goofball who thrives in a homeschool environment, that's a good foundation for exploring different ways of teaching. What trips me up is how much of what they teach feels incompatible with their cardboard DIY projects. I've broken down on screen what each episode covers. Much of this show is teaching literature and history using elaborate playsets. And like I said earlier, even if you can classify episodes as being about history or literature, these are more often springboards to teach about morality. Take episode 3 for example. They want to teach the kids about Frankenstein, so they build a big cardboard lab so the kids can recreate the story. I'm not sure how they'd effectively play Frankenstein if they haven't read the book, but sure, whatever. By the way, subscribe to my channel for more fumblings with the theory of mind, because you won't find anyone else on this platform worse at it than me. You know, if anyone from Daily Wire is taking notes and needs my neckbeard opinion on how to improve this cartoon, Chilla would be a lot more fun if it could be a little more abstract when it's discussing fiction and mythology. Do something like the Simpsons anthology episodes where everyone imagines themselves as the characters. We almost got that in the episode where the gang looks at constellations, but if things get too abstract, that would go against its alleged modus operandi of reassuring parents that homeschooling is fun. Anyway, back to the Frankenstein episode. They build a cardboard lab for the kids and baby Chilla starts acting like a real goober, which really cheeses off Chip. So the parents break it down for Chip. Sure sucks when your creation gets away from you, and that's exactly how Dr. Frankenstein felt. If anyone here had any faith in me, I'm about to ruin it and admit I can't suspend my disbelief in the show for literal babies. But this felt very strange. How would they know that the baby Chilla would act out and teach this valuable lesson? Is this really the best way to teach the values of Frankenstein? Why can't this dipshit kid just read the book? Oh, well, he's a little too young to read Frankenstein. Okay, man, then load up Junior with Huckleberry Finn. God, you're a Daily Wire cartoon. Why don't you act like it? I think this episode specifically tripped me up because Frankenstein is a book you can make a pretty strong argument that it's a feminist work. The Dangers of Science interpretation is not wrong, but it's really only one possible interpretation of the book. We all know that a bad English teacher can drain the joy from reading, but the way they're teaching literature feels like an even worse version of The Curtains Are Blue, mostly because they're not actually reading the book. So I think the goal here is to make the kids familiar with the canon of great books, but without the reading. The Chilla fam is going to play act Frankenstein, but they're also told in no uncertain terms what's the deeper meaning of the book. the point is to make them familiar with the great works of literature before they can read it, there has to be a better way to do this. Chilla is at its strongest when it sticks to being a show about being a good egg. One of the strongest episodes is Community Garage Sale Day. It delivers exactly what it promises. There is a community garage sale day, and everyone in the Chilla fam is in a competition. Whoever can find the most valuable item for $1 wins. Chip accidentally destroys his neighbor's vase, but in doing so, he learns his neighbor is actually a paleontologist. Rabbit neighbor shows off his dinosaur collection, and they have a nice moment. When the family regroups, he doesn't have anything to show, but he's definitely found something much more valuable. It's a pretty solid story of the real treasures of friends we made along the way. It keeps the Tutti Frutti dress-up time to a minimum. It doesn't substitute a great book with a Sparks Note edition, so all around, great episode. More if Chilla was like this, I wouldn't find myself autistically straining to understand the logic of their world. I can't help but wonder how Chilla would play out if it was allowed to be an overtly religious kids show. Kids' Bible stories are a lot more straightforward for teaching morality. And I can also kind of believe that they'd have a vague idea of what to do. That is, if Dad Chilla says that they're playing David and Goliath and the kids are able to easily assume their roles during playtime, I can believe that they heard that story at church before. For whatever reason, that feels easier for me to believe than the kids vaguely knowing about various public domain literature and play acting it out. But if this show took a more religious turn, it would definitely alienate a lot of viewers. Especially if you're super religious and think dress-ups for fruits. And on that note, I know a skilled educator can make elaborate cardboard playsets a solid foundation of their classroom. But if I think about the advantages of homeschooling just off the top of my head, I say you can take your kid to museums, you can do more field trips to learn about ecology and natural science, maybe sign them up for volunteering. Show keeps insisting that cardboard playsets is the key to educational awakening. And I know they are using it incorrectly. Okay, let's look at the first episode as an example. They want to teach their kids about the moon landing, so they build a play rocket for their kids. And yeah, that's pretty cool, but it's not educational in a more traditional sense. When the kids are fighting over who gets to go first, the parents shrug and say it's up to them to figure it out. During these moments, I almost want to praise this show for being more hands-off and letting the youngins figure it out themselves. Something about this gives me a very unsure feeling. It's like these parents are in the uncanny valley between helicopter parents always involving their kids in their arts and crafts projects, being way too hands-off. There's a lot of playtime, sure, but it's mostly within the confines of the parents making the rules and calling the shots, which, yes, if this is a substitute for school, that makes sense. Except there's not a whole lot of actual education being applied here. The focus of the show's plotline seems to be the parents parading around their cool projects. One of the more puzzling examples of this is the episode Ahab Goes Bananas. Mom Chilla builds a boat for the kids to play in, and she keeps telling them, "Be careful, I worked hard on this." She is overly concerned that the children are not using the plaything she built for them correctly. Go on, Mom Chilla, keep telling them to slow down, so instead of having fun, they can marvel at your craftsmanship. The episode escalates to the boat being destroyed, and wow, does that put Mom in a bad mood. This makes Chilla and Dad Chilla realize that, oh gee, maybe we got carried away. They clean up their mess, which feels like it should have been a bigger priority. I don't know, man, getting soda all over the carpet feels like a bigger oopsie doodle than roughhousing Mom's DIY project. But the boat being destroyed is the big dang emotional climax of the episode, since the show insists on holding the adults' craft projects in the highest regard. The most frustrating example of this has to be the episode all about the Benjamins. The episode begins with girl Chilla skipping her gymnastics lesson to practice cello. And hey, credit where it's due. It does show another advantage of homeschooling. We see flexibility in curriculum and putting a greater emphasis on personal responsibility. But the lesson here is showing that you can have multiple hobbies and interests, and the Chilla fam gets this point across by showing different versions of Benjamin Franklin. Ben Franklin the scientist, Ben Franklin the author, Ben Franklin the fashionista. And seeing that Benjamin Franklin could be so multifaceted makes girl Chilla realize, hey, I could do it all. I could play cello, and I can go to gymnastics, and everything is just peachy. But this is the episode that made me realize the show's fundamental flaw. I see what they're trying to do with the lesson in this episode, but I want to zoom in on the dad showing the virtues of Ben Franklin, the scientist. He gives a brief retelling of Benjamin Franklin's kite story and lets girl Chilla act it out by flying a kite indoors and decorating the room to look like a storm. This feels like the dumbest possible way to teach this lesson, which, by the way, isn't totally accurate. Thought this was common knowledge by now, but whatever. There's plenty of ways to teach kids about electricity. For example, here's what ChatGPT cooked up. That's when the switch flipped for me. building these at-home science experiments is going to take a little more critical thinking and confidence than making a cardboard playset. But if we assume this show is working as covert propaganda to promote homeschooling, it's going to predominantly feature activities that are easy for parents to assemble. Let's look at the 2 science episodes. And just to be a little more charitable to Chilla, let's reclassify the episode The Cupcake Factory as a science episode. That episode has girl Chilla learning about Henry Ford's assembly line, where the family makes an assembly line to make cupcakes more efficiently. Girl Chilla keeps butting into nitpick and she learns she can't micromanage every step. Since this puts so much emphasis on the historical figure of Henry Ford, I initially classified it as a historical episode. But the heart of it is a science lesson since it's actively teaching the process of optimization. So the first of our science episodes features everyone baking cupcakes. Feels appropriate for the target audience, but it's also something the parents would be familiar with. So I'll classify this as shit you can do at home. Next up is Snow Battle. This episode begins with Chip dismissing his parents' elaborate Rube Goldberg machine as fucking horseshit. So the parents start a snowball fight, where they pretend to be Russian spies with a secret plan. Chip is able to steal the secret plan, and the secret plans are all simple machines. So it was all a ruse to get Chip into building and using simple machines. So I'll classify this one as shit you can do at home, but there's definitely a simpler way to get this point across. Snow Battle has the same issue as the Frankenstein episode, where it sure is lucky that these kids played within the confines of the adult's roadmap. There has to be an easier way to demonstrate the principles of simple machines. This is also the episode that relies the heaviest on cartoon logic, featuring oversized snowballs and towering snow forts. Find this all very odd because the lesson here is pretty easy to explain without this extra fantastical element. I was reminded of the Dr. Stone episode where Senku uses a pulley to save Kohaku from being trapped under a tree. A lot of Dr. Stone is huge anime hype moments using scientific principles. The whole series is incredibly white-pilled and optimistic. It's easily my favorite anime, so if you like it, we are friends, and sure, I'll pick you up from the airport next weekend. And the grand optimism of Dr. Stone is a huge contrast to Chip thinking his parents' projects are lame. Which I understand where Chip is coming from. Parents suck, and I'd hate to have to constantly put up with theater kid antics. In universe, I get why Chip isn't really thrilled about this. One of the more interesting parts of Chilla is how often Chip pushes back or feels he's being treated unfairly, which gives this show an interesting dimension. But this is a tricky balance because if your character pushes back too much, you end up with Caillou. And sure, Dr. Stone is aimed at a slightly higher age demographic, even if you throw in the Mecha Senku specials and their science textbooks. But I don't know, this attitude of science rules isn't age specific. I won't say Chilla is actively anti-intellectual since its primary focus is on social-emotional learning, it's just another type of learning. Just feels like it's missing a chance to show a little more excitement for its subject material, which again might just be part of its intent of reassuring the parents that even if your kid hates traditional learning, homeschooling is for you. Strangely enough, in the final science-based episode, Chip is pretty hyped to play with simple machines. In the Egglympics, Chip wants to do crazy stunts on his bike, and his dad encourages him to use the scientific method to test eggs on a miniature cardboard skate park. After Chip breaks a bunch of eggs on the course, he wraps up an egg in bubble wrap to keep it safe and concludes that now he can do crazy stunts as long as he wears a helmet. And also Dad Chilla dresses up as Aristotle but with a surfer bro accent? Alright, sure, fine, whatever. This episode felt especially dumb. I don't know if the egg drop experiment is considered too woke since it's so widely taught in public schools, but I was kind of confused by this episode. Like, this episode takes a whole lot of steps to get them to the experiment, which convinces Chip to wear a helmet. I'm not seeing the correlation here, like, I don't know how cracking eggs would specifically convince him, but alright man, I guess. Does feel like the experiment presented in Chilla is a lot easier and safer than the egg drop experiment, which again works with the thesis that this show allegedly exists to reassure parents that homeschooling is totally fine. So I'm putting this in the same classification as Snow Battle. Well, alright, I could go all day nitpicking examples, but you know what? The truth is, none of this matters. You want to homeschool your kid? Fine, go ahead. This does not make a difference on how I live my life. But what does make a difference is seeing Mama and Papa Chinchilla. Because here's where it does get personal. One day, I got home late from school because I had signed up for drama club, and my old man was furious, since drama's for And I explained, Dad, no, you don't get it. Joining drama means I'm going to swoop in and claim all the chicks, since all of the other guys there are gay. Being the token heterosexual in drama club is a cheat code to immediately amassing a harem of babes. But Dad wasn't buying it. He whooped my ass and I never went back. And here's my proof, years later. There's no way these two cornballs didn't meet in drama club. There's way too much dress up and building sets. I will not be convinced otherwise. So yes, Dad, you can get a girlfriend by joining drama club. These chillas are my evidence. God, she's beautiful. I've never laid eyes on a more stunning woman. That warm smile, those caring eyes, the perfect blend of wisdom and playfulness. I'd love to squeeze her fat, jolly face. Oh, let me roughhouse your DIY project, Mom Chilla. That should be me married to her. Those should be our kids we're improperly homeschooling. Fuck you, Rob Schneider, for making your kids play Frankenstein. I'd raise them right. Fuck you, Dad. If you hadn't stopped me, I would have found the love of my life in drama club. But instead, I'm single, and it's your fault.